biggest thing I love stressing is just having the mission that's bigger than yourself. And it seems cliche maybe, but it's helped us to grow.
Welcome, everybody. Today, we've got a great guest talking a lot about multifamily and how to scale aggressively. But before we get into that, how's it going, Mason?
Things are good. This was a great episode, and it was really enjoyable talking to someone that actually ties a mission into the business of real estate investing, where for a lot of us, that mission might be financial freedom or independence from a corporate W-2 job or something like that. And what Whitney's doing is much bigger than that. And it was really cool to see what he's accomplished.
It really is. And it speaks to almost potentially the synergy that philanthropy and business can kind of create. So Whitney Sewell, for anyone who doesn't know, is the host of the real estate syndication show. I know him from going on that years ago. And he founded LifeBridge Capital in 2017, where not only are they killing it with over 1,500 units in their portfolio valued at approximately $450 million, which is crazy in 7 years, but he gives 50% of his personal profits to support adoption, which we get into that whole venture and the philanthropy and the mission behind the business, which is pretty incredible. So we dive deep into how he expanded the business and grew the business so quickly, how he's raising investor capital, how they're finding deals, managing the team. I mean, really the nuts and bolts of a large multifamily operation is what we talked through today, and then a bit about his charity and what they're doing for kids that need adopted. So this was a great episode, and you really made me think about my own business. So let's bring him in. All right, Whitney, welcome to the show.
Honored to be here, gentlemen.
Absolutely, yeah. We're excited to talk to you. A lot of your investments are in Colorado Springs, where Mason and I have lived for years. But what we wanted to start out with here, in social media, podcasts, you hear a lot about big deals closing, big checks people are posting, or I bought 200 units. It's all very exciting. But what I've found, in my 7th year of doing this, is that the actual day-to-day of running a business is often a lot of minutia, a lot of difficult conversations, problem solving, headaches, where it's just not as sexy as it's made to sound on podcasts. And so for you, with the scale of your business and your portfolio, what does the day-to-day actually look like for you managing a company that has 1,500 units?
It's a great question. I look at my calendar numerous times a day, and often I'm thinking, okay, what else can I cut out? What's going to be next that I can slice? I'm pushing my assistant she's my gatekeeper, right? And I just keep pushing her to ultimately have a bigger gate or with a stronger lock, right? But that's difficult. And so it does take a lot of one-on-one with team members, right? It does take a lot of time, just intentional time figuring, hey, what's the highest and best use of my time? Because that has definitely changed over the years. It was very different now than what it was, say, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. There's a different highest and best use then than there is now. And often, there's other team members that are doing a lot of the things I was doing then, right? And that are doing it even a lot better than I could have ever done it as well. Today, I'd say I was looking at my calendar as well. I just brought it up, but often on Mondays, it's a lot of one-on-one, my business partner and other leadership, within the team that we meet with, we're talking about maybe deals we're pursuing or deals that need work, or different ways we're pushing our team, and that we need to discuss at a high level, and how those people are being coached, or what the future of the business looks like, right? And how we're pursuing that. Different one-on-one team members with direct reports, people that report to me. Tuesdays or more social media stuff, podcasts, interviews for our show, other shows, like this today. And then there'll be other investor calls mixed in there as well. But then even at the end of the day, we're doing some more leadership meetings. Sometimes we'll increase the number of leadership meetings depending on what's happening, right? Maybe there's a deal that we're pursuing, or there's something else that, hey, we're working on this specific thing. We're compartmentalizing the business more so than we ever have, or departmentalize it. We're like breaking it down in as much detail as possible. And we've done exercises like this in the past, but we're trying to continually grow corporately, mature, that's a process, right? But it's something that we've focused on a lot lately, more so. And like I said, we focused on it in the past, but we just want to continue that process. And so we've increased the number of even leadership meetings through the week until we just exhaust this process. And so we work on that again on Tuesdays till pretty late in the day. Yeah, Wednesdays we'll have our LTNs where we're all coming together and we'll discuss issues as a team but successes as well. And that it's been a fun process of going through just the LTN process, our level 10 meetings with our team, and even just some unique questions I asked at the beginning that's helped with our culture and whatnot. So that's fun. And then more investor calls. And then oftentimes Thursdays and Fridays, they may be other meetings that are outside of the office, but oftentimes they turn into days where I do more planning and more even social content creation or more higher level things where I'm focused on hiring. I'm focused on getting those job descriptions right, getting the hiring process right. What is the next hire that we're looking to make? Where are we at in those processes? Because other people now will run that process until they get to a certain level, and then I'll take it, or my business partner, one or the other, or both of us, depending on the position. And so that's a very high level typical week for me. And I would say meetings used to start at like 6:30, 6 in the morning. If investors would schedule a call then when I first started, now I try to not have a meeting before 10 a.m. that's scheduled because I'm an early riser and I love the morning time. As far as my time in the Word or my wife and I get up early with coffee and we're reading our Bibles, praying together. Then there'll be other books, usually self-improvement books or something that I'm reading as well, and then exercise, and then jump into my day in the office. But there's still a time where there's a space for me to be creative. There's a space for me to think through the day and prepare for specific meetings as well before we actually jump into the Zoom calls, back to back.
Yeah, that was a great answer. So it sounds like you're at the point where being the front facing work, raising investor capital, keeping those relationships going, doing the front facing marketing, but then also internally people management seems to be the major thing you're doing. And I have to say too, I can relate to getting up early and having some time in the morning that's quiet before your phone's ringing where you can do some deep work is really important. But I want to talk a little bit more about managing people at the level that you're doing it, because this I have found, and I think Mason can relate, and I'm sure he's itching to ask questions because he has a big background managing people. But
he's got a pen in his hands. He's written down he's ready.
Yeah, I'll pass it to him after this one. But this has been a big bottleneck for me. I'm learning how to better hire, manage, and incentivize people. So this is a big question, and if you're don't have a great answer to it, that's fine. But is there anything you would tell yourself, 5, 6, 7 years ago from before you got started or when you were first getting started that would have helped you with more effectively hiring, training, and keeping good people?
Yeah, the hiring effectively, man, it is a learning process. And when I say it's a learning process, it's like most things. You don't get to the 50th podcast till you do the first one. Right. It takes a few repetitions. I hear all the time, I can do it easier myself, or I can, I don't want to have to waste the time, hiring somebody, training them, then them leaving 2 months later. And well, guess what? Unfortunately, that's probably how you're going to learn to hire. And it's hard. You can bypass a lot of mistakes. Obviously there's books, and I can list off some books that have been very helpful for me. But you need to hire an assistant, right? Get started with somebody, even if they're a virtual assistant, or I've hired a number of people from all over the world or from the Philippines and for different things as well, at least to get started there. And there's still a number of people that are in the Philippines that we use for different specific skills that they have, right? That they can add to our business. But if it's somebody that's in the States that's full time, well, it's a very different hiring process as well. But at least initially, I would have started the hiring process faster. And I would have hired faster as well in some scenarios. Oftentimes, there's been a few people who ended up not being a good fit. And I think within probably a week or 2 weeks, my business partner knew that. But we didn't act on that fast enough. And I still wanted to believe in this person and push them and them to grow. But 2 to 3 months later, we still know it and they do finally exit. But it's better for me. I feel like I don't want to wrong this individual. I care about them, but I needed to transition my thinking to, no, this is what's best for them also, to go ahead and maybe provide, good criticism, right? Helping them, but also to allow them to go on to the next thing faster, and us.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think it's something that, I've personally struggled going from large corporation into the solo entrepreneur to delegating certain processes and positions potentially too early, and some that I haven't done that I should have done from the very, very get-go. So, I hear the language you're using. It brings up Gino Wickman and Patrick Lencioni and the who not how, and all sorts of different stuff, that I've seen on your bookshelf and books that Dan and I have read myself. But going back a little bit, what do you feel like you maybe delegated too early that you wish you had maintained control of, that you were, focused on getting off your plate?
That's a good question. Usually you get the opposite question, right? But as far as delegating too early, I almost want to say there's nothing that I delegated too early. It's like, how fast could I, I didn't delegate it fast enough. I would say I've probably delegated things to the wrong people, or it's kind of wrong person, wrong seat type thinking, right person, right seat. Maybe I expected the wrong things out of the wrong skill sets or the wrong person, where maybe I hired them for one thing, and then I thought, they could probably do this thing too. So I give that to them. And they could probably do this thing too. And I'm like, okay, well, let's, you should start doing this also. And this stuff starts to fall through the cracks, right? Or it's something that they're not skilled at, or they're not motivated by, or, just should have been in a different seat, different skill set or different role. And so I think that has happened, but, I want to prioritize the things that ultimately I am good at, right? And I want to just constantly think the 80-20 principle, right? I'm sure you all have heard about that and read books about it. But, what is that 20%? How do I figure that out? And then how do I give that 80% to somebody else that's really good and motivated at that thing, right? And that's when I'm telling you, I'm looking at my calendar, that's often what I'm thinking. Do the things I'm doing this week or spending time on, are they the highest and best? How am I still not fitting that 20%? And who's on the team, or who should I hire, that can do those things, right? So delegating too fast, that's a hard one. I can't think of anything, because I'm always trying to figure out what else I can delegate to somebody that can do it better.
I think that's fantastic. And I think it's focused on looking within of, people have this tendency to focus too much on their deficits and try to get better at them, as versus quadruple down on their strengths and delegate the rest. Whitney, you're a master networker. You're a machine at networking. I've listened to your podcast. I know that's something you focused on a lot, especially at the beginning of this. And I think another theme that I see kind of throughout your social media and the content that you put out is the idea of 10x is easier than 2x. That being said, you've networked with a lot of people. I'm sure you've seen a lot of syndicators and operators do really well in business, and I'm sure you've seen some potentially crash and burn. How do you feel like, or your company has distinguished itself by being able to scale very effectively compared to those that attempted to maybe scale too quickly that failed?
Yeah. Scaling definitely brings about another set of issues, right? There's different problems when you grow that you just didn't expect or know about. It's like Dan was talking about earlier, it looks glamorous, right? On social media, everybody says, closing this 200 unit deal. Well, you didn't see all the ups and downs and the hiccups and the kicks in the face, right, or the teeth, often to get to that point. For me, early on, when it kind of started with doing a daily podcast, ultimately changing my mindset towards the 10x is easier than 2x, even before the Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy book came out. That was the mindset then, right? If I had been doing a weekly podcast, I would have tried to have done all the editing, especially then. I would have been trying to save the money. I would have been I would have thought, oh, you know what? I'll learn how to do this. I'll get the audio editing done, the video editing done, and I'll get all that put out. I'll figure it out, right? But I know that I would have gotten frustrated and probably would have quit. However, since I committed to doing a daily podcast in the very beginning, doing 7 a week and still working full time at the time, and still traveling, traveling to lots of conferences. We were in another adoption process, traveling a bunch for that. And I knew that it was not possible for me to do all that. It made me think different, right? I had to start learning to hire people immediately for things like that, for audio editing, video editing, podcast production, and some virtual assistant stuff. It just wasn't any other way around it. And it took, a number of times or hires to get some of them correct. But it made me think different right then by committing to 7 times, right? What most were doing. And most even thought I was crazy, and many people still do. And sometimes I consider that a compliment. But I consider it a compliment. They often when people say, "Oh, you're crazy," right, for doing a daily podcast. But it made me think different. It pushed my network to grow, like you're talking about, 7 times what most were growing, right? And so it made things happen that otherwise wouldn't have if I hadn't thought at a much bigger scale. And so even hiring now, and there's skills that came from having to do it so early on that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have thought bigger at the time.
Okay, I like that. So it was almost forced growth where you committed to doing a lot and had to delegate and didn't really have another option. So that's interesting, and I think that's worth thinking about, and probably something Mason and I should take to heart. But all right, we've got a big picture view. I'd love to drill down a little bit on the more tactical, the more today. What are you doing? So you mentioned, I think before we started recording, that a lot of your portfolio was or is in Colorado Springs, which obviously Mason and I are very familiar with. What is LifeBridge Capital focusing on today as far as size and location, and also just where are your deals coming from?
Yeah, as you all know, man, deal flow has been extremely slow over the last almost 2 years now, and it has been for us just like everybody else. But I would say the first 12 months of that the last 2 years, it was kind of discouraging, right? Where are the deals? Why aren't we doing? And just like you said, you see other people closing deals, and you think, man, what is going on? We're not investing final on this one, and then again we're not investing final, and again we're not investing final. Okay, well, what is happening? And then finally, I think over the last 6 to 12 months, the more operators that I know, the more ultimately trouble, right, that I hear in the market, and I'm so thankful, right, that we didn't do those deals, that we didn't offer more on, or that we didn't, that we could have done. And so I think it's been a real blessing that we've not done more deals than we have in the last 2 years. I'll just say that, than if we had. And so early on, yes, we got started in Colorado Springs. We probably have, 800 or 900 units there. And then we have a portfolio in Vail as well. And then a few hundred units of Class A in Boise, Idaho, and then a few hundred and some retail in Kansas City, Missouri. I think Boise, Kansas City are some markets that I think we're going to continue growing in. We do have deal flow there. We were finally best and final on another project about 3 months ago. Didn't get that. We have another project in Kansas City. I'm hoping to have a contract on here in another probably a week to 14 days, something like that. But deal flow has been extremely slow. And I'm hopeful that in the next, 3-6 months at the most, we're going to see some interest rate cuts, and that's probably going to turn some deals loose, or more transactions loose, is my hope anyway. So our focus is, it's always been multifamily, but we have transitioned from, say, the older value add, heavy value add type properties that are mostly what we have in the Springs, to some newer Class A type properties as well. And so there has been a transition in our buy box, that's for sure. But even in markets as well, I don't think Colorado is, they're not on a trajectory of being as landlord friendly as some other states. And so we just want to keep that in mind as we continue to grow, and whether we continue to grow there.
It makes sense. And I guess question to deep dive a little bit into the Colorado Springs market. I know the city has approved upwards of 20,000 new units in the coming years. And anecdotally, I feel like there's a greater desire in these markets for tenants to want to live in the newer Class A properties, kind of like what you're targeting. Do you feel like in some of these markets where building is going up a lot, do you have any plans to sell off portfolios if it seems like they're coming saturated, or how much are you paying attention to the metrics of new units coming online?
Yeah, it's a supply demand issue, right? That we have to keep in touch with, or no doubt about it. I do believe in that. I mean, that market has had just one reason we loved Colorado Springs even from the beginning is it's just been a very steady growth. I mean, it had very steady growth for like 100 years or something. I mean, it's just very steady. It's not like let's say a boom like Dallas has had, or, Dallas Fort Worth or something like that. But it has been very steady for a long time, and similar to Boise as well. However, like I said, even while supply and demand, I mean, it matters, right? We want to monitor what's coming online, what's projected to come online, in connection to population growth, in that area, the demand that there's going to be. But even, still, I still think I want to pay attention to how landlord friendly is it going to be? Do we even want to own there? Even if there's high demand, how much control ultimately is the local government's going to have over the way we operate, right? And the way we raise rents, or can we not? Or how do we evict people? Can we not? How much control do the homeless ultimately have over your property, right? Things like that is a big deal, right? When you're managing a business.
Absolutely. And, some of the irony of that is the more government regulation there is, it quickly creates more of a moat to new construction, and then tends to push up prices and just make everything more expensive, which is ironic. But I'm still buying in Colorado, and I just focus on nice and newer buildings where I can get great tenants. But that's hard to do at large scale multifamily. Okay, got an idea of what you're doing today. Sounds like not a lot of acquisition in the last 12, 24 months, and you're happy about it. But I'm always curious at the level you're operating, are all your deals coming from brokers, or are you doing anything direct to seller, or where do all these deals come from?
They do. They have come from brokers. The broker relationship has been crucial for us. I say they've all come from brokers. There's a few projects we've bought that have come from developers specifically. But even then, there was still a broker involved, maybe except for one deal. So that's been a good avenue for us as well that we're growing in, as far as growing those relationships with some developers. But it has the broker connections have been crucial for us for deal flow. So if we're talking 150 plus unit deal, or let's say average purchase price of 30 to 40 million, majority of the time those sellers are going to be working with a broker.
Yeah,
unless it's somebody we've transacted with before, and maybe we have a connection with.
That's what I figured. At that scale, they pretty much have a monopoly. But it's always worth asking, see if anyone's got any other solutions. But all that to say, how has the money side of things been going? Of course, it's not quite as easy to raise money as it was 3 or 4 years ago. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. So how is that working for you? Is it mostly coming from old investors and clients, or still new ones coming into the door? Kind of what's been working for you there?
Yeah, and I'll mention too, we talked about over the last 2 years, we've closed one portfolio, and that was actually in Kansas City. There's 3 parcels there, and outside of that, that's the only capital raise we've done in that time period too. And so for us, it's like, it's hard to know, right, what investor sentiment is to some degree. However, recently, I mean, it's so important that we do know, though, right? It's important that we keep a pulse on those investors, and so on our investor base. And so one thing we did, we sent out a poll just probably a month and a half, 2 months ago, and just asking a few simple questions. And we want to keep it as simple and short as possible. So obviously we get more responses, but we're asking things like, are you ready to invest today? Are you not? Are these the types of, or would you be interested in this type of deal? Why or why not? Just a couple of basic questions. How fast are you looking to invest, and how much? And maybe there's optional box where they can just type in anything they want, which I would encourage as well, because it's good to hear, allow them to just speak freely. And so that provided a lot of good insight. And what I think we have found is that there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear, especially right now with the political situation, even just global situation of everything that's happening. A lot of people are fearful to let go of their cash right now. I know, and so I talk to many operators often that are larger than we are, and I want to hear what they're thinking and hearing and seeing and doing, right, as often as I can. And it's just across the board, everybody is struggling to raise money more than they can remember, right? And most are at, I would say, 50% or less, and often are less than that of what they used to be able to raise, right now, or thought they'd be able to, should be able to raise. And, I mean, it's just really common, and some just really big struggles across the investor base, right? Or they've had some deals that aren't going, like they thought they would. And so it makes it a lot more difficult for them to raise money. For us, keeping a pulse on investors has been crucial, right? And so something we've tried to instill in our systems, and it's difficult, right, to make this happen, but is I would like to speak to every investor, every active investor that we have at least once a year, and then we'll even tier them, based on different qualifications, depending on how much they've invested or how many deals or funds they've invested across. I may try to talk to them personally twice a year. And there may be even other times of the year where other team members are reaching out to just say, hey, how are you doing? How could we serve you better? Things like that. But I found that it makes a big difference when I personally call them and say, hey, Mason, Dan, we're grateful for the trust you've placed in us. How do you feel we're doing? How could we serve you better? Are you getting the monthly reports? Are you getting the information that you would like to see? Is there a way that you would prefer to see that differently, or that would better, help you, like those questions? And it just shows that we care, right? It just shows that we do care about our investors. I would say we've not done that enough, but we are striving to do that more and more. And I found that to be probably one of the highest and best uses of calling. I mean, is our current investor base. Many people are so focused on lead gen, which we need to be as well. But think about all these people who have already said, hey, we trust you, and handed you a lot of money.
That's great. And it's a lot to manage. So I'm interested about what your team looks like. Do you have an investor relations team? Walk me through, I guess, the entire org chart and org structure that you're managing.
Yeah, I would say we're about as slim right now as I can remember. We are, so it's my business partner and I would say he heads up acquisitions, and I'm more on the capital side, marketing, branding, all that, investor relations and team people management across the team. But so my business partner and I, we have another guy in leadership who's really the head of acquisitions now and asset management. We have another guy or an analyst under him that helps with asset management, but also is analyzing, obviously, pretty much nonstop deals, our current portfolio as well. We have another lady in investor relations who is more, I call her a director of investor services. And so she really she champions that experience, right? The investor experience. But she also heads up every capital raise. And so she knows the entire process inside and out. Whether you're an IRA investor in the process you need to go through to make that happen successfully, to the software that we use, our secure portal, to everything in between. And then I obviously have a full-time assistant as well, and she does a number of things. She calls investors, she sets up calls for me, and somebody that signs up on the website, she's calling them hopefully within even 5 or 10 minutes, but even less than 12 hours typically, to say, hey, we're grateful for your desire and that you signed up on the website. How does Thursday at 11 o'clock work to speak with Whitney, type of thing. And so I am trying to talk to most investors right now, even new investors. I can't do that all the time, but I just find that I have a better conversion rate. And if I have the time, I would like to do it. But let's see, that's pretty much it at the moment. I think there's 7 of us. So we had management in-house. One time we had hired 50 to 60 employees and even managed in-house, and we've gone back to third party now. And so we've scaled way back. I find that depending on how you structure your business and if you have people in the right seats, you can get a lot done with fewer people if they're motivated.
Yeah. Let's walk through that. You had 50 to 60 employees and now you're down to 7. Walk me through the decision to bring that many people on, and then let that many people go or
Yeah.
outsource it to a third party or whatever the process was.
So when we decided to bring management in house, we even said right then, and actually we were forced to do that. We had another group in the Springs that was managing for us, and ultimately we were pushing them and pushed them enough till they fired us, and so they just but we were learning enough to know that there were many ways that we could be more efficient, but it wasn't happening. Okay, and so we thought, hey, we've got to step this up on the management side. But we felt like they were a good partner for a long time, so we started pushing them. Hey, what about this? And could we start doing this? And eventually, they didn't like that, and so they fired us. And it's been a blessing, I think, long term that happened. They gave us 30 days, and so you can imagine the scrambling, right? Oh my goodness, but they were, probably 3 to 4 weeks before that, it was just a few things that were happening that my business partner decided, hey, we better put some plans in place to figure out what's going to happen if this group doesn't work out, right, long term. And so we'd already started thinking that a little bit, but didn't know it was going to happen that fast. Sure enough, they called, give us 30 days. Then we talked them into giving us 60 days. And in that 60 days, we hired a leader for our own management company. We started hiring like mad. Right. And we did. We brought on about 50 people and took over our own properties. But when we did that, we said, okay, 10 months in, so ultimately we could hit the 12-month mark, we're going to reassess how we're doing. And obviously we're assessing all the time. But I mean, a real assessment as far as going out to even larger third-party groups and comparing to what we are doing. All right. And when we did that, we realized that like at 1,500 units, and spread across a number of states like we could not manage as efficiently as somebody that's managing 50,000 units, right? Which seems obvious, but the numbers were there. And there were massive savings to be had for our investors as well. And so seeing that, we thought, we could not have made up the difference in-house to what we knew we could go third party and get. Okay. And so knowing that, we said, okay, we've got to transition. We have to find a group that can manage our properties across, where we're at. We went through a process of getting different estimates and quotes from different groups and said, okay, this is the best group that we feel like we should go with. But the big dilemma, like you mentioned, Mason, was, hey, I care about all these people that have committed to work for us, right? And so I didn't want to just have to let 50 people go, right? I mean, that just killed me. But I know that's decisions that people in business we have to make all the time, unfortunately, but it does happen. However, the group that we decided to go with, we approached them and said, hey, we care about our people. We would love for them to be able to stay on if possible, right? And so this group agreed to take on every employee that wanted to stay. And so while that didn't make the decision, I mean, we had already decided to go with them, but we approached them and said, hey, we know you're going to have to hire a number of people. We would love for our people to get a chance, right? And they agreed. And so that was just icing on the cake for me because I wanted to do right by our people, right? And obviously a lot of them didn't stay or whatever, but they had the choice, right? They didn't, it was their choice to not continue if they didn't. Some have, continued to stay even this long. But that was the decision making. Like in the beginning, we already said, hey, we're gonna reassess. This time we reassessed and figured out that okay, we can't be as efficient as these large groups, and we feel like this one can really just move the needle for us and for our investors. And so we said we got to do it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's no small decision, and that's crazy that they initially gave you a 30-day notice that they weren't going to manage your units anymore. But pretty cool that the company gave your employees that option. So I'd love to talk a little bit big picture now, Whitney. Looking 5, 10, 20 years into the future here, what are some of the trends that you are watching and kind of aligning your investing to? Because I think trying to predict with specificity what's going to happen is ridiculous, but you have to make decisions every day. So you got to make assumptions about the future. So what are the big trends you're following and kind of betting on?
It's hard to know what's going to happen a year from now, much less 10 years from now, right? For Sam and I, or my business partner and I, we love thinking big. We love scaling. We love that thought process, right? And over the last number of years, I think, we've had different goals, right? This many units or this whatever, this many assets under management. And I've almost moved away from that. Because I want something that is, that's ultimately more aligned with our entire team, even our families, and like just thinking about the entire big picture. And when I do that, when I just think about an AUM number, an assets under management, or a unit count, that doesn't affect our employees really, right? It does to some degree, but it's not something that they're going to be that motivated about. Does that make sense? Like it's like they don't care ultimately about you making another $1 million this year, right? If it doesn't affect them. And so, something that we have focused on, and I think will continue being the focus, is a mission that's much bigger than just lining our pockets financially, right? And so from the very beginning, our mission has been to help families adopt children. And so we have four children through adoption. And it's a long story, but ultimately, the mission became to help families who can't afford to adopt. It's a very expensive process. And I'm going to get a little more to your question in just a moment, but all I'd say, like, this mission that's bigger than just a financial goal has fueled not only our team, but also, my wife and I in the very beginning, when things were really difficult, like, she really cared about that mission as well, even though she couldn't care less about real estate specifically, but she really cared about this mission, of helping these other families bring their children home. Well, then every employee that I've hired, I wouldn't say the management side, but within LifeBridge Capital, every one of them, without me bringing it up, have said they wanted to work for us because of our mission. Okay. And when our team members can be a part of something that's bigger than themselves and them care about that, like, they're going to push, I feel like, a lot harder than if the goals are just around my personal financial success. Right. I mean, I've seen it and I felt it firsthand. Even our investors want to partner with us because of this mission that they're a part of as well. That's bigger than, say, just me getting another bigger house or vehicle or whatever it may be. Right. And so I want to keep that in mind as we make different projections and goals and things like that. I want us to continue to grow at probably 4 to 6 acquisitions a year and just be steady. Right. I want us to just be steady. And I feel like that's really good growth. We've not done that over the last couple of years. And like you said, I am happy about that. Obviously, I'd rather we were buying good deals, but if it's not a good deal, I'm okay with us just saying, you know what, it's all right. We're going to wait. Right. And I'm so thankful we have waited. And so in the market, we have selected the markets that we're in for a reason. And we're focused on Boise. We're focused on Kansas City, for reasons there that you all probably both know, and just growth, that we project there and see there. Obviously, things like the election tends to make, things happen in the economy one way or the other, and we'll see what happens there. But as far as we want to continue, we're going to be very focused in those markets. And as we grow, we're going to continue to grow team members as well. But again, if we're doing 4 to 6 deals a year, I'm going to be happy. I feel like our team members are going to be happy. Our investors are going to be happy. And we're just, even I said, that steady growth, but even for our investors, the thing that I heard a lot from that forum that I was telling you all about was they want something that's steady, right? They're all experiencing, or for the most part, they're experiencing, distribution stopped or capital calls or, from all over the place right now. And so it's like, okay, we're okay if it says 14% IRR versus 21 if we're still getting a distribution, and so we're just keeping that in mind, and that's why we're shifting towards even a newer asset class or just newer properties, right? A newer vintage, and so we can provide that. Just to be, we want to just be known as, hey, they're steady. They do great at what they do. They didn't have to continue growing 10x every year, but man, they're just really steady and treat me well.
Whitney, I appreciate your passion. And I think in creating a mission-driven organization, it's really easy to align incentives with the employees that you bring on, with the investors that you bring on, with the type of deals that you're doing, where if you and your family are financially taken care of, it's fueling a passion, not a passion project exactly, but, we can call it a passion project for the sake of this. So with your foundation, one, I want you to spend a little bit of time talking about it, something that I care about and passionate about. My background is I was a behavioral health hospital executive, and I'd say 30 to 50% of the kids that came into our hospital came from foster homes,
Wow.
failed adopt, all sorts of stuff like that. Where do you see yourself, or where do you see your foundation going that you and your wife have created? What does that look like in 15 to 20 years?
Yeah. So right now we've partnered with about 50 families who have actually brought children home. And it's amazing that the Lord's allowed us to have just a little role in that. I hope that, let's say 5-10 years from now, it's not just 50, but it's 500, right? Or even 5,000 families that have been touched or helped to bring their children home to, it's their forever family. And it's about raising awareness. It's hard to get in front of donors and people that are passionate, about helping these families bring their children home. But I also hope that as we grow and scale LifeBridge, that, our investors are also passionate, or people that are passionate about this mission, that it doesn't affect their returns, but whether they like it or not, they do play a role, right, in helping these families and helping these children. So, as far as the foundation, I hope that, in 5 to 10 years, we've partnered with not only 50, but 500 or even 5,000 families who have successfully brought their child home through adoption.
That's fantastic. And can you talk a little bit more about the process there, in case any of our listeners are attempting to adopt a kid?
Yeah.
What do you guys do? How do you serve these families?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mason. So ultimately, the process is so extensive, and it's such an emotional roller coaster for families. And it was for us. My wife and I were pretty newly married. And when we moved to Virginia, I'd been in the military and in law and Kentucky State Police. I came home from Iraq, Kentucky State Police, and then I became a federal agent. That brought us to Virginia, where we live now. As soon as we moved here, the first weekend we were here, we heard a pastor talk about how they had adopted. Now there's 150 million orphans in the world, and we had never heard of that before. We grew up in a one-stoplight town. We didn't know anybody that had ever adopted or ever thought about it or discussed it. However, on our way home from this event, all we could do is ask ourselves, well, why would we not adopt? It just seems like the right thing to do. And so I'm really thankful for our ignorance in the process, or else we may not have done it. But within 2 weeks, we applied, within a week, we applied to adopt from Ethiopia. 2 years later, our first son, Samuel, comes home from Ethiopia. We started the process again right away. About 10 months later, our second son, Elijah, comes home through adoption. A few years later, our daughter, Eden Joy, who's now 5, and we have another daughter now, Selah, who's 9, almost 10 months, who came to our family through adoption. But what started happening, Mason, when we were in the process of adoption, and there was just a lot of struggles financially to make that happen. We had a failed placement, meaning we lost like $30,000. And I mean, after you've done a lot of fundraising as a family on one income, all your family, all your friends, your church family have all like donated and given, and then all of a sudden this money's gone. I mean, it is such a kick in the teeth, right, for that family that's trying to bring their child home. Thank the Lord, within like 2 weeks, we had all that money back through it's a long, amazing story. But obviously we got through the process, but the process is very difficult. The podcast started growing. I started speaking at a lot of different real estate events and conferences. I would talk about our this mission, right? And, ultimately how this mission fueled LifeBridge Capital, how it helped us to grow, how it helped us through hard times, how it helps us to hire. I mean, all these things. I mean, people would come up afterwards and say, Whitney, well, we would love to adopt, right? But it's more than we make in a year, 50 to 70 grand a year, unfortunately. And so that fueled us even more to say, you know what? I want to help you to get your child home. And I don't want the financial piece to be the burden of bringing one of these children home that need a family, right? And so now people can apply at Omnah, OMNAH, Omnah Foundation, .org and orcom.com, and they can apply there for assistance. And if you're in the adoption process, you've had your home study done, we would love for you to apply. We would love to know about you. Or if you're passionate about helping families adopt, we would love for you to be a donor as well. 100% of donations go directly to families. And so we would love for you to partner.
That's amazing. And it's a challenging time to be a person. It's always a challenging time to be a person. And it's expensive. Kids are expensive. Adoption is expensive and extraordinarily complex and an administrative burden and nightmare, whether you're adopting within the United States or abroad. And I think it's beautiful to see you making it so where financial constraints aren't limiting those who potentially could be the best parents in our society. Because I know so many great people that, Dan and I are young. I'm turning 30 in a few months now. And I see so many people our age that would or could be fantastic parents, but they can't afford the idea of it. And by eliminating that barrier and allowing adoption to be an option to so many families is really beautiful. So we'll make sure to have that linked. And if you are called to do so, please get involved with Whitney's organization in some capacity. But I'll pass it back to Dan now.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what I saw it was either on your website or on your bio, 50% of personal profits to adoption. Can you maybe speak to both Mason and I and some of the other entrepreneurs listening on how we should think about and approach just philanthropy in general?
It's a great question, Dan. And so I feel like every penny that's given to me is from the Lord, and I feel like I'm called to steward it well, the best I possibly can, and that it's not mine anyway. And so I feel like when we can give, that it's an honor to be able to give. It's an honor to be able to help these families. And so you've heard, was it Jim Rohn or one of the speakers talk about you have to give to be able to get, right? Or the more people you can help, the more people ultimately it's going to help you, type of thing. And I wouldn't say that was our motivation in the beginning, but I know that when you have a mission, you have a passion that's bigger than just finances, it just changes your entire perspective, and not just about your wallet, but about everything that you do. And I mean, like our mission statement at LifeBridge is to transform the lives and communities through sound, faith-driven real estate investments, right? And we're doing that through through adoptions, right? Through the Omna Foundation. We have another piece that's to foster human connections through just intentional community investment. We do that with a group called Apartment Life, if you've not heard of them, and they help build community at our communities, and where we care about our people, right? And we want to help them. And we know that also helps our investors if our tenants are cared for, right? Because then they want to stay. And so there's less turnover. But then also we want to provide our investors the resources to build what I call the legacy of true wealth. And so it's another way of giving back that, I want to help them even to focus on what it looks like to lead well in their home as much as in their place of work. Or, I want them to have a family mission statement, right? As much as a business mission statement, and to be able to lead their family well, and to build ultimately a legacy of true wealth. But all of that's, wanting to give back. And I feel like that's how you're going to be fulfilled, right? It's not by having a bigger wallet. We all know of plenty of people who are very wealthy who committed suicide, right? Or just very unhealthy. It's not going to make you happy to just make more money. And so when you can be in just a mindset of giving, it just changes the way you look at the funds coming in and just your mission in general. And so the more people, yes, you can help, the better off you're going to be.
That's beautiful. And you mentioned stewardship, and that's, I feel like, kind of the theme of so much of what you do, whether it is in your multifamily business or in your foundation. It's just taking care of people for a long time, and you're entrusted to do it. We're leaving this world behind eventually, and we want it to be a better place than we left it, just like the apartments that you're coming in and adding value to, or the families that you're assisting in adoption. So I love to hear it. Whitney, this is my favorite stuff to talk about. I think with that being said, for those of you guys listening, whether it's adoption or housing for low-income individuals or any sort of charity or philanthropic work that's out there, you don't have to care about everything. You don't. There's so many issues going on in this planet, and it can be so helpful to dive deep into one specific area and make a way bigger impact on a handful or a few dozen or a few hundred people. So, Whitney, go ahead.
Yeah, when you can find that thing that you're really passionate about, or the thing that almost brings you to tears, right? You get talking about certain things, and it's like almost just wells up inside of you. Like you should write those things down, when those things happen. And then when you can tie that to your business, right? I mean, it just changes things drastically, right? When you can tie or to the way you make money. And who would have thought that adoptions could be tied to a real estate company, right? Well, because that seems kind of crazy. But man, it's transformed the way we do everything. And even I would say even early on, we literally sold the farm. I was training horses professionally as well many years ago. And that was just a passion of mine since I was a little boy. But we literally sold the farm so we could start the real estate business and another adoption process, right? But even my kids were involved in the mission, right? Like they knew that this was the overall mission. And so it's not just your mission, right? It's the family's mission. It's the overall company's mission. And when you can, like I said, when you can tie it to something bigger than just a dollar sign, it just makes you more unstoppable almost, and allows you to create relationships and connections that you never would have before.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, come to shows like this expecting to just get technical knowledge. And there's a reason that the mission and vision and values of an organization is so crucial, and why the best employees are not those with technical skills, but with great soft skills. It's because it gives purpose and passion to something that, learning the skills of real estate, like even the most complex deals any of us have done. I mean, dumb people can do them. Like it's not that hard, but if you're not motivated by something greater than yourself, it's really hard to move forward. And man, Kentucky horse money, there's a lot of opportunity to get investors out there. I was in Lexington for some stuff, bachelor party a year ago, and I saw horse money at a different level. But anyways, I digress on that. Whitney, where can people find out more about you?
WhitneySewell.com. That's the best place to get started.
Perfect. Well, Whitney, my last question for you is, are there any questions that we did not ask you that you wish we had asked you?
I think we hit it. The biggest thing I love stressing is just having the mission that's bigger than yourself. And it seems cliche maybe, but it's helped us to grow. It's helped us in a way. I didn't see that happening in the very beginning. I didn't plan it that way. But man, later on, I could see that, hey, people can, from the conversations at a real estate conference, where people are meeting 200 people at a time, and we talk about our passion, our mission, and things like that, where everybody else has talked about their real estate business or the markets or the next multifamily deal. Guess what? When I called them back a week later, they remember who I am. And like I said, I didn't plan it that way, but that's the way it started happening. And so I just stress, focus on doing something bigger than just your financial goals, right? Have a mission that's connected to those financial goals. And that benefits others as well. And then you'll really see growth. And we grew really fast, the first few years. And I think it was mostly because of our mission that's tied to the business.
And I think that right there is the intangible factor that allowed you to grow and scale beyond effective processes, systems, and delegation. So this is Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkas with the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.